Morning, the Vatican has announced overnight the death of Pope Francis.
Scripps News Group Amber Strong has a look at the legacy Pope Francis leaves behind in the Catholic Church.
Before earning the moniker the People's Pope, Pope Francis was born in 1936 as Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the Argentine-born son of Italian immigrants. As a youth, he worked as a bar bouncer at a nightclub and considered a career in chemistry before entering Jesuit school in 1958. There, he rose through the ranks, becoming a priest, Archbishop of Buenos Aires, and finally a cardinal in 2001. He took his place in the papacy in 2013 as the first Latin American and first Jesuit pope. His namesake was after St. Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of the poor, a name he worked to live up to, paying his own hotel bills and urging people not to travel to Rome to celebrate his rise to pope, but to give that money instead to the poor. Much of his teachings were focused on the impoverished, denouncing certain tenets of capitalism in early writings, remarking, "How can it be that it is not a news item when an elderly homeless person dies of exposure, but it is news when the stock market loses 2 points?" He also worked to bring attention to the environment in his writings, calling the planet our common home and seeking to reconcile the call of the faithful to stewardship of the earth. But he struggled to deal with a church marred by financial scandal and global allegations of sex abuse and cover-ups. In 2018, he took a small step in reconciliation, apologizing to abuse survivors after defending a Chilean bishop accused of turning a blind eye to abuse. The next year, Pope Francis formally defrocked Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, who was accused of abusing men and children for decades. And he helped establish a handbook that encouraged clergy members to report sexual abuse allegations to legal authorities. He also addressed other areas of contention, including the role of women in the church, placing women in more senior roles at the Vatican, and apologizing to Indigenous people in Canada who'd been abused by Catholic-run schools. Perhaps his most celebrated and scrutinized actions surrounded his views on LGBTQ people and same-sex marriage. He made headlines in 2016 after saying the church should apologize to the person who is gay whom it has offended, and encouraging parents to welcome their LGBTQ children. In 2023, the Vatican stated that transgender people could be baptized under certain circumstances, a shift in previous positions. His inclusive stances and focus on issues of social justice often put him at odds with more conservative members of the church. In 2023, Bishop Joseph Strickland, a conservative and frequent critic of the Pope, was relieved of duty following an investigation. Francis didn't shy away from international political conflicts, placing himself at the center of Russia's war with Ukraine, allowing a Ukrainian and Russian woman to participate together in Easter services, and repeatedly calling for an end to the violence. He also met with Israeli and Palestinian families impacted by the war, praying for both sides and calling the conflict terrorism, a comment that stirred controversy in Israel. Later in his papacy, he was frequently hospitalized and suffered from nerve pain, mobility issues, and respiratory illnesses. Francis hinted at stepping down in 2022, saying the door was open to a resignation, and, quote, "It's not strange, it's not a catastrophe. You can change the Pope." Amber Strong, Scripps News.
Yeah, we continue to follow down breaking news out of the Vatican City, where Pope Francis has died at the age of 88.
Joining us live this morning from the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C., Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George. Joe, thanks for being with us this morning. Let's start with reaction to the Pope's passing, flooding in this morning.
Well, it's first to remember this is a spiritual leader who died, but also a political leader who has passed away. You don't have to be a Catholic to be inspired by Pope Francis, by what he has done over the course of his papacy. Remember, he's 88 years of age. He passed away after battling for weeks double pneumonia. When he was released from the hospital in Rome just a few weeks back, his doctors, even the church at the time, advised him that the Pope would be taking periods of rest. Well, he didn't look like it, that he was resting very much. I mean, on Easter Sunday, granted one of the holiest days of the year for Catholics and Christians, the Holy Father not only blessed the faithful in St. Peter's Square and Vatican, but he also met with Vice President J.D. Vance. In fact, Vice President Vance will go down as one of the final individuals to have met with the Holy Father before passing. Around 1/4 of Wisconsinites are identify as Catholics. But again, you don't need to be Catholic to have been inspired by Pope Francis. Vice President J.D. Vance, again, having met with the Pope just a few hours ago, he met with him yesterday, released this statement, posting online, quote, "I just learned of the passing of Pope Francis. My heart goes out to the millions of Christians all over the world who loved him. I was happy to see him yesterday, though he was obviously very ill." Guys, what begins now is a tradition, centuries old tradition. The Holy Father was the 266th pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church, so the church is familiar with what goes next. But for all of us, we're a bit unfamiliar. This is the first time in 20 years that a sitting pope has died. Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul, passed away in April of 2005. Remember, after Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict was pope, but Pope Benedict resigned. Unusual to have a resignation. Pope Francis continuing the tradition of staying in the papacy until the very end. A day of mourning. Yes, guys, this is an international story this morning, but in many ways it's a local story. The bells will be tolling, masses will be celebrated in honor of Pope Francis today throughout the Diocese of Milwaukee.
Yeah, this will begin a week of mourning in the Vatican City as cardinals begin to descend on the Vatican, just mourning the life of legacy of Pope Francis. So what is next for the Catholic Church following his passing?
Right, there'll be a period of mourning, several days leading up to what will be a state funeral, what will be a funeral in St. Peter's Square in a couple weeks' time. Exact days, exact schedule will be released shortly by the Vatican. That is when we will anticipate a conclave beginning, when cardinals from around the globe of voting age will enter the Sistine Chapel and conduct one of the more unique global traditions, the election of a pope, when our eyes will be fixated on a chimney in the Vatican. Black smoke, no pope. White smoke, habemus papam, Latin for we have a pope. Pope Francis was a historic selection when he was selected by the cardinals. He was the first pope of Latin America. Does the church continue to make history after Pope Francis? Does the first Asian pope or first African pope get elected? Or does the church go in a bit more traditional conservative direction? As many as people who praised Pope Francis's leadership, the Pope did have critics within many prominent Catholic circles who did not want necessarily the reform that Pope Francis often advocated for. Again, a spiritual leader passing away today at the age of 88, but also a political leader. Pope Francis involved himself in global conflicts, whether it was poverty, whether it was the war in Ukraine, conflict in the Middle East, or even climate change, writing an encyclical letter about the environment. Again, a sad day for Catholics. Catholics around the globe, guys, including Catholics waking up this morning with us in Wisconsin.
And certainly a lot of them here in Milwaukee. And you were mentioning the funeral, and I was just reading on Vatican News that the Master of Apostolic Ceremonies said that Pope Francis, his wish was that the funeral rites be simplified and focused on expressing the faith of the Church in the risen body of Christ. Again, this Pope being different than those before him and asking for a more simple funeral ceremony that we will see in the coming days.
Yeah. All right, Joe St. George, thanks for joining us live this morning. We appreciate it. So here locally, we anticipate a mass to be held in response to the Pope's passing.
Sydney Orr live this morning at the Church of the Jesu on Marquette University's campus, where we expect there will be a mass later this morning. Good morning.
Yeah, that's right. It could be as early as this morning, so we're being here throughout the day today to see those people kind of pour in to begin their morning process. Of course, a lot of reaction coming in all around the world, and of course here at home as well. The Vatican announced Francis, quote, returned to the house of the Father at 7:35 in the morning, just after Easter. We're told we were actually just here at the start of Lent speaking with a lot of believers who were then sharing their thoughts and prayers for him as he was battling pneumonia. But now again, we are expecting to see some of them here to begin their morning process. So we'll be here hoping to speak with some of them to kind of just see where their heads are at, as this is news many of them will be waking up to this morning, and we will be sharing with you any plans as far as the mass that you can kind of come in to show your support in honor of the life and legacy as well. But for now, reporting live, Sydney, your Team J4 News.
Yeah, a lot of churches, of course, just celebrated Easter Sunday yesterday. Some of them have services again today. Others are closed because of the Easter holiday. But certainly there will be a gathering of faithful here in Milwaukee.
And this news breaking overnight for us here, early morning hours in Italy. So as more people are waking up and hearing the news, you can only anticipate that more people will be heading to church or maybe just to pay their respects outside of the building. So we'll continue to stay on top of this throughout the morning.